everything that you need to focus on is happening in your own backyard. You don't need to cast a wide net. You just need to be as local and visible as possible in your local market. Improving your local visibility, building trust through storytelling, and then aligning.
Welcome to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast with your hosts, Charlie Cameron and Alex Schlow. This is your go-to show for cutting-edge insights from industry leaders in residential assisted living.
Whether you're ready to launch your own assisted living business or looking to invest in this fast-growing, high-impact sector, we are here to equip you with the tools, strategies, and confidence you need to succeed. Get ready to ride the silver tsunami and change the future of senior care. Now on to today's show. Welcome back to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Schlow, and today's guest is someone who is helping senior living operators actually fill their homes. Jerry Vinci is the founder and CEO of CCR Growth, and he is a true leader in the senior living marketing space and in demand generation. He's also the host of the #1 senior living marketing podcast, From Leads to Leases. Jerry, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me. And great intro,
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
That was great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, excited to have you on the show. It was great talking beforehand about everything that you're doing in the space. And I know folks are going to be really excited to learn more about marketing. That's certainly a pain point that a lot of folks have when they're operating one of these homes. Jerry, for those who don't know you yet, do you mind just giving us a quick overview of who you are, what CCR Growth does, why you're passionate about helping senior living communities grow?
Yeah, sure. So I am the founder of CCR Growth, and like you said, we're a demand generation agency, a strategic growth agency for the senior living, exclusive for the senior living industry. What we do goes a lot beyond marketing. If I had to summarize what we do, I would say we help operators build a full revenue engine that aligns marketing, sales, and operations into one measurable, predictable system. And I think most communities, they're doing the right things, but they're doing them in silos. Like marketing isn't talking to sales or sales isn't talking to operations. And so it's hard for communities to really know what's working, what's not working, why it's not working. So we essentially step in and fix that. So our core focus areas are typically, first and foremost, is clarity, making sure that we're helping the community understand what is working and why. Second would be accountability, making sure that everyone on the team understands their role and the role that plays in helping them with growth, helping them with sustainability, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And then lastly, it's building that structure, that foundation that's going to set them up for success so that their growth and their occupancy can become predictable and not just an accidental happenstance that tends to happen. My journey into senior living, it didn't start with like business. It didn't start with marketing. It really just started with my grandparents when I was a teenager. I saw my parents really struggle with a lot of care decisions. All four of my grandparents went through some form of senior care or home health care. And then the defining moment, I think, for me was when my grandmother was diagnosed with dementia and ended up in a nursing home. And I remember visiting there, and it was like this intimidating, cold, like chaotic experience for me. And I just kept thinking, even back then, I was like, man, this can't be what like good care looks like. This isn't how it is for everyone. And then fast forward a couple of years, my grandfather ended up in an assisted living home, and it was like the total opposite experience. He was happy. He went from being isolated and lonely to being really happy and thriving in this space. So that contrast between my grandmother's experience and my grandfather's really showed me the power of what the right environment and community can do for somebody's physical, social, and emotional health. So that kind of laid the foundation. And when I started my agency, we were just a generalist agency. We didn't really focus on senior living. And then in 2014, we signed our first senior living clients. And when we did that, all those stories and memories about my grandparents came flooding back. And it came full circle. So I realized that for us, it wasn't just about marketing. It was about helping families make one of the most emotional, complex decisions of their lives. And we had to help them do it with clarity and help them do it with trust. And so that's where our mission today and why CCR Growth exists. You know, we're here to help senior living operators focus on the thing that matters most, which is helping older adults find the right place to call home.
That is awesome. Jerry, thanks for sharing your story. I feel like so many folks can relate, especially in this space, can relate to some either issue with a grandparent or someone in an assisted living facility, or have wished that they learned about residential assisted living or more boutique assisted living and realize, like, hey, there is a large difference that's out there in terms of quality of care, in terms of the environment that these folks are in, and in terms of community, which, as you mentioned, is so important. And the other thing I wanted to make sure folks caught when you were talking about CCR is you've been doing this since 2014 in the senior living space. So a lot of experience, obviously through the pandemic and some market shifts as well. And so I think that it's really important that folks understand that you guys have had a lot of experience in the space all the way back to 2014. And so I wanted to make sure that we emphasize that point as well. Jerry, what are some of the things that you see? What are most senior living operators getting wrong when it comes to marketing today?
I think for your audience, if we want to talk about the small and mid-sized operators, I think the biggest challenge that they face is they're trying to model the big players model, right? They're trying to do the same thing. And I don't think that helps them build a strategy that really fits how families are actually making decisions today. The big box operators, they're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on digital ads and lead aggregators, third party agencies, things like that. But because they're so large, they're able to skip that foundational work that you need to do to become visible. And with a small community, you're everything that you need to focus on is happening in your own backyard. You don't need to cast a wide net. You just need to be as local and visible as possible in your local market. Improving your local visibility, building trust through storytelling, and then aligning, like I said, with the system, right? You want to align your marketing and your sales so that everyone is talking the same language and is focused on the same goal. I think that's the first of the biggest challenges. The second, I think, is we hear a lot, communities will say, we're getting leads, they're just not converting. But then when we look under the hood, we see that their CRM they either don't have a CRM or their CRM isn't set up the way it should. So they're losing leads throughout the process. They're not sure where their leads came from, or they're not sure what step of the funnel somebody's in. They might have a Google business profile, but it's outdated. And even in the sales side of things, maybe they have a follow-up process it's either slow, it's inconsistent, or it's non-existent. There's a lot of communities where I just see leads just sitting in the CRM that nobody's even reached out to. So those are some of the big challenges. I think probably the last big one is that people are chasing lead volume rather than lead quality. There's this whole mindset, and it's a vanity metric, right? We need to get more leads. Instead of 300 leads, we need 400 leads. And in reality, it's like you really probably need a handful, especially for a small community. You just need a couple of really solid families that are a great fit for your community.
Yeah, those are all awesome points. I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I think one of the strengths of residential assisted living is all the differences, all the high quality personalized care, more boutique environment compared to the institutionalized setting, compared to these big box facilities. It's only going to benefit you to stand out, to show, hey, this is why I'm different. This is why grandma or grandpa is going to do better here, and really lean into that. And I love the hyper local piece. But I think people do get kind of wrapped up in that. Like, there's no reason for you to market to the entire state of Florida, for example. If your home's in
No.
Tampa, focus on Tampa. It really actually probably just focus on a few zip codes in the neighborhood where you're located. Because if you have a 10-bed home, you just need 10 residents. It's not like you need to cast this broad net that you mentioned, and then the lead flow is going to be more high quality. One thing I wanted to hit on is for folks who don't know anything about marketing, do you mind explaining what a lead funnel is and what a CRM is, so people have that kind of foundational understanding there?
Yeah, a lead funnel would essentially just every community typically has a pipeline, right, that they would follow, and it usually has lead stages in it, and you would potentially have different prospects in different parts of that funnel at different times. And if you think about the funnel shape, the people who are at the top of the funnel are the ones who might just be doing research. They're trying to solve a problem. They may not know what that problem is. They're just in the initial stages. You get to the next phase of the funnel. These people know what their problem is, and now they're looking for a direct solution. You get further down the funnel, these people, maybe they've identified someone who can solve that problem for them. And then at the bottom of the funnel are the people who are essentially ready to take the next step. So that would be the generic funnel. But then when you look at senior living, you think about the pipeline. You typically have people who are in the inquiry stage. You have someone who's in the pre-tour stage, someone who's in the post-tour stage, maybe a deposit stage, and then a move-in stage if you had to simplify that pipeline. So that's typically what that looks like. And that's usually handled in the CRM. So the CRM would be the customer relationship management tool. And it's essentially just a piece of software that you can use to keep track of everything that has to do with prospect management and engagement and nurture. Every CRM does different things. Some of them will not only keep your prospect information, but it'll also allow you to maybe send out like nurture emails or send out text message reminders for upcoming tours, or there's a whole bunch of features, a feature list that a lot of them have. But it can be your most powerful silent partner in your business because it's helping you manage all of those pieces in one place.
Absolutely. Are there any CRMs that you guys tend to recommend or use more commonly?
It depends on the needs of the community. One thing that we've been doing for the last 2 years is we've actually been building custom CRMs for the communities that we manage, just because we found that there are CRM solutions out there that are built specifically for senior living, but there's quite a few of them that are a bit complex, especially for a small boutique operator. They may not need all the bells and whistles. They might just want something functional with the lead stages, and so that they can track, did this person come in from Google? Did they come in from an ad, Facebook? Did they call? That might be all the complexity that they need. So we're able to create something that's keeping it at their level. And typically with a small operator too, you're wearing a lot of different hats. You're the marketer, you're the problem solver, you're the accountant. So you're handling all those different things at once. So you're not going to have time to really do all of the complex functionalities that would come with the bigger CRM.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's an awesome tool to help you go from working in the business to working on the business. And using those tools and using those automations can be so helpful. And like you mentioned too, that funnel can get leaky if you don't have some of those things set up and you're just losing leads each step of the pipeline, each step of the funnel. And it's a great way to make sure you capture those, make sure you keep them nurtured and engaged, and ultimately, hopefully, to convert to a new resident in your home. So that's awesome. Thank you for explaining that. It can get a little bit confusing if folks don't know anything about marketing. And if they do, it's still a good refresher. So thanks for that for sure.
Yeah.
Jerry, if we were going to talk about where a new RAL operator should spend their first $1,000 on marketing, what would you say?
First $1,000, the first thing I would say is to absolutely not spend it on any kind of paid advertising. I think that's the biggest misnomer, because people typically know that if they start running ads, they're going to get leads in the door pretty quickly. But the problem with that, especially if you only got $1,000 budget, is you're going to run through that pretty quickly. And when it's spent, then you have nothing to show for it, right? Like you haven't built any equity online at all. So if I was going to spend that $1,000, I probably would focus on anything that would help my community get found and for it to be trusted online. Those are probably the two things I focus on. So there's some simple things that you can do that, and honestly, some of these don't even cost anything. So first and foremost would be your Google business profile. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot today because it is the number one digital asset that you have online, even more powerful than your own website sometimes. But that's essentially your digital front door. And the reason that's so important, at least in my opinion, is that for all the communities that we manage, on average, 60 to 70% of all search traffic comes through that Google business profile when it's optimized properly. So most families, that's the first touch point that they have with your brand. And if that isn't complete and accurate and filled out to the best of your ability, you're losing a lot of opportunities to be as visible as possible in search and to connect with the right families. When you're thinking about what does a complete Google business profile look like, there's a ton of different fields you can fill out on there. Make sure all the information's filled out. There's categories on there. So for example, if you run an assisted living community versus maybe a memory care community or skilled nursing or just an independent living community, those are all different categories on Google. So making sure, and you can list multiple categories. So if you've got a multi-level care community, you can have all of those listed in there. And sometimes I see somebody will just put retirement home and they won't list the other things. They won't list assisted or memory care. So if anybody's searching for a memory care community, your home is not going to show up. So that's problematic. And yeah, so making sure all that information is filled out, making sure that you're describing all your services to the fullest extent you can. And it's the filling out that profile is the easiest way for people doing searches for things like assisted living near me to be able to find you, because that Google business profile, those Google listings, they show up in the map pack in Google search. And I don't know if you're familiar with that is, but that's essentially you typically in the search results, you'll see some ads at the top, and then you'll see this small section that has maybe 2 or 3 listings of local options. And that's your local map pack. And so those are the ones that are getting most of the clicks. And on a mobile device, that's taking up the whole real estate on the screen. So you want to make sure that you're as visible as possible in that local map pack. So that's probably the first thing I would recommend. The second, I was originally going to say professional photography, but then I was like, you really don't even need professional photography today. You just need quality photos. You need something that authentically shows what life at the community is like, because I think one of the number one questions that families want to answer is, can I see my loved one there? Or if it's independent living, can I see myself there? And if you have pictures that are stock photos, or they're curated photos, or they're doctored photos, you're not going to get a true sense of what that community is. So just making sure you've got photos on there that really represent that community, so that when somebody actually shows up to do a tour, that what they saw online matches the in-person experience. And then the last one is where you probably would want to spend some money, would be just creating like a simple website. It could be a one-page website or maybe just a few pages, but just making sure that the information on the website matches the information on your Google listing. You've got your services on there. Make sure you show your pricing. That's another thing that I always recommend. That for some reason, there's a lot of communities that just don't want to share what they're charging. And I understand with assisted living too, sometimes there's point systems and other factors that come into play that maybe might make pricing a little confusing, but you can always have a starting at price. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for people today, is they're doing a lot of research up front. And if you're not giving them that information, then they're just going to move on to the next person who does give them that information. So as transparent as you can be, the better.
Man, that is good advice. I agree, Jerry. I think, it's so frustrating when you're going to try and find something and you can't find a price anywhere. And honestly, we're in the day and age where a lot of people don't want to talk to other people. So they're like, oh, I don't want to call. I don't want to send an email. I just want to
Yeah.
have this answer and have it quickly, which is sad that we're in that stage, but it's true. And so I think, it is great advice. And the crazy thing, I was sitting here thinking about it as you were saying this, is the number of assisted living homes or facilities that I see that have not done all 3 of these things just blows my mind. And it's a good opportunity for people who may know a mom and pop operator who are looking to sell an assisted living home or a smaller facility or something along those lines, to look at, hey, do they even have a Google My Business account? Do they even have a website? Do they have good pictures? All these things that you can go in immediately and really add value, increase the amount of residents who are in there, and ultimately increase your revenue. And so it's really some incredible things that are free. I did want to ask you real quick, Jerry, about Google My Business. If I remember correctly, isn't there a place where you can also like share photos and updates? And do you have any recommendations for how often you should do that? Is that something you should do
Yeah.
once a week, once a month? What's that like?
Yeah, so there's 2 reasons to do it. You can post as frequently as you want to. The cadence for us that seems to work well is a weekly update. And with Google Posts, the Google Business Profile allows you to do posts, and it's similar to like social media. So you can put a post up there where you're just sharing information, or if you have an event, you can promote an event, or if you've got other external content that you want to share, maybe a blog post or a video or something like that, you can put that up onto your Google Business Profile. And yeah, so weekly would be good. Same with photos, as often as you can, putting up new photos of things that are happening within the community. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell families that are looking that you're active, you're engaged with your community, that you care about your community. You see a lot of people build a Google Business Profile, they set it and forget it, and they essentially don't ever touch it again. And that just sends the wrong message. It doesn't show anyone that you're actively involved with the community. The other part of that is that Google is also looking at that. Google, when it comes to the Google Business Profile, there's 3 core factors that Google looks at to rank your community higher than another. And there's relevance, proximity, and prominence. And so relevance is just, does the search term someone entered match what my community represents? So if I put in, for example, assisted living near me, and I own an assisted living community, there's a chance that I'm going to show up in the search results, right? If you add proximity on top of that, proximity is how close am I to that person who's searching. So if somebody searches assisted living in Madison, Wisconsin, and my community is in Madison, Wisconsin, again, I'm that much more likely to show up. And then if you add prominence on top of that, prominence is, what does my online reputation look like? And what does that look like across the entire web, not just on Google? So Google's looking at all three of those factors to rank your Google business profile to determine if you should stand up higher than your competitors.
Wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So incredibly important in a completely free tool. So there's
Yeah.
really no reason why folks shouldn't do that. I love that. Are there any more low-hanging fruit strategies that you see folks consistently underutilize, like social media or going to events, anything like that you found that's been really beneficial for operators?
I think these are really powerful because what we're trying to do is to build that strong foundation. You're building permanent digital assets essentially that they're going to work for you day and night, 24/7, whether you're there or not, unlike ads. So I think the only other one that I would really say would be pivotal would just be making sure that your reputation management game is on point, that you're generating as many reviews as you possibly can. Again, that ties back into your Google business profile and the prominence that your listing has. But it also, again, allows people to get a peek into what the culture is like in your community, because even as a small operator, say you have a RAL, you've got 6 to 10 residents, something like that. You're not going to be able to generate a ton of reviews just from the families or the residents themselves, but you've got all these other people who are tied to your community. You've got discharge planners, you've got nurses, you've got caregivers, you've got home health aides, and you've got other people who maybe were there since the home started. And all of those people could also be leaving reviews and telling and sharing their experiences with the staff and with the brand. So I think that's probably one of the most underutilized aspects, just because there's so much inherent value in that. And I think there's a statistic that says 61% of people trust online reviews as much as they do from the personal recommendation. So those hold a lot of weight for people.
Yeah, I agree. I know whenever I'm looking to go to a restaurant or try something different, I'm always looking at the reviews and the quantity and the quality of
Good or
those
bad.
reviews to make those
Yeah.
decisions. And people do that for every decision. And so it certainly
Yeah.
makes sense that, hey, if I'm going to put grandma or grandpa in a home, I'm going to look at these reviews and make sure that they're awesome. And that helps build that picture, that story, like you mentioned, of can I see my grandma or my grandpa living in this home? And it just helps add to the credibility and add to that story. So I think that that's really important. Awesome. Jerry, let's talk about some of your guys' experience. So you've helped communities go from 55% to 100% occupancy. Were there any key factors or difference makers that you noticed in those cases?
Yeah. Let me tell you about one community. It didn't go from 55 to 100%, but it went from 54 to I think 85 in 12 months. I think that would be a good place to start.
Awesome.
This was it's an assisted living community. It's a nonprofit in New York City. They're in the heart of Manhattan. It's an awesome team. They had a strong mission. This building had been around since like the Civil War, so they've got a ton of history, right? But when we started with them, I think they were at 54% occupancy. And the problem for them, they had a digital marketing presence, they had a website, they had social media, they had a Google business profile, but none of it was really optimized very well. And none of it was really being maintained or added to. They weren't updating social media, they weren't putting posts on Google business profile, and they weren't adding blogs or any other useful content onto the website. They also they had a fragmentation problem. I think that's what I see a lot too, and this is really common in the senior living industry, is there's a lot of point solution providers, right? There's this one company doing this one thing and then this other one doing this other thing. And it's even the same in the marketing space, and it becomes really disjointed really fast. So you've got a community that's got multiple vendors. They're all doing a small piece of the marketing, but there's no unified.
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but let's be honest. Most real estate investing right now, it's either buy a fourplex or try Airbnb and hope for the best.
Yeah, we're not here for that.
We're here to show you what we believe is the most overlooked high cash flow real estate strategy in the game right now. You guessed it, residential assisted living. It's literally the one place in real estate where you can net six figures on a single home and feel like a decent human being at the same time. You're helping sweet old ladies eat pancakes and play bingo and live longer through better care. You tell me what's better than that.
So, we're hosting a free live webinar called How You Can Create Financial Freedom with Residential Assisted Living. No fluff, just value. And it's happening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 Mountain Time. No excuses. It's online. Put on sweatpants. We won't judge.
We'll break down why residential assisted living is the best opportunity right now, the 5 steps to take down your first home, and how to set up a business that makes a real impact and real money.
Spots are limited. So don't be that person who DMs us in 3 months saying, wait, is it too late to start?
So hit up theralroom.com/webinar and register now.
Be the hero your grandma already thinks that you are.
We'll see you there. Pancakes not included.
Focused at all. No one's accountable because everybody's doing a different piece of the puzzle. And everybody's busy, but no one could really say what was working. So the first thing we did was we helped simplify that. We essentially came in and we're like, okay, we need to optimize all of your digital assets and make sure that the messaging and the strategy is coherent and consistent across the board. So that website, the Google profile, and their social media, all we made sure that messaging was the same across the board. Then we built a custom CRM because they didn't have one. I think they were using a Google Sheet, or it might have even been pen and paper. Yeah, which was a nightmare. But looking at building their CRM and then creating their system around that. So making sure that the marketing team was responsible for the quality of the leads. The sales team was doing the follow-ups the way they need to do the follow-ups and not leaving leads hanging. And then the operations was finishing the job by making sure that the experience when somebody actually moved in matched what marketing and sales had just promised that it would be. The other thing too with this community that was interesting was we were able to monitor some of the phone calls to give them some feedback on how they were doing. And we noticed at the front desk, when somebody called, they were just asking, they say, what's the price for an apartment? Or can you tell me more about your meal plan? And the front desk would say, oh, you need to go to the website. Like, they wouldn't answer any of the questions directly. And it's like, how off-putting is that for these people to be calling and not to be able to get any information directly? And then even if they were forwarded to somebody else, it was just going to a voicemail box or something like that. They weren't actually getting to speak with someone who knew what was going on. So we obviously fixed that. We gave them some sales scripts and some training around that of how to make sure that they're giving people that first brand experience that's really going to make them want to take the next step and want to tour the facility community. Sorry, hate the word facility. But yeah, so once we built that system, they in those 12 months, they went from 54% to 82% occupancy, which was like roughly a 50% increase. And they didn't have to spend anything outside of what their monthly retainer was. It wasn't like they had to incrementally spend more month after month to get those results. It was just putting the system in place, making sure everyone was accountable to fulfill what was being expected, and then just being consistent with it across the board.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. I think it's helpful for folks to hear some good examples and some good stories on how that all works and how the pieces get put together. And I was thinking about like the quarterback of a football team, right? Like you guys are the quarterback trying to help get the offensive line and the wide receivers and everybody on the same page so that they can go out and score the touchdown. And so I think it's really helpful for folks to hear that. You mentioned earlier, Jerry, about storytelling. And what role does storytelling play in modern senior living marketing?
I think there's probably something that I need to explain first, because when I talk about demand generation, everybody's gonna be like, what the hell is demand generation? So let me just explain what that is first, because that's the core of what storytelling revolves around. Marketing, the whole marketing landscape has shifted now. And like you said, we're a demand generation agency. That just sounds like a buzzword, but it's actually how families make decisions today. I define demand generation as creating conditions where your customers come to you already informed and already interested because you've built credibility, trust, and value up front, right? So the old school marketing model, it was like transactional. It was about buying leads or like being really salesy and pushy with tours. And that new model, it's about education and like earning trust, demonstrating value, helping to guide the family before they ever even reach out. And the reason that's important is with demand generation today, families are doing like 70 to 80% of that research before they ever even contact a community. So your sales process is starting before you even realize it's starting. And the nice part about that is that when families finally do reach out, they're so much further along than they were in the past. And you really only have that last 20% to go. So it's really just like getting them over the goal line. But the only way to do that is to be authentic in how you're marketing. So it's not that the strategies have changed in terms of what we're doing. We're still creating content, we're still running leads, we're still nurturing through email sequences and doing all that stuff, but it's what we're saying and how we're delivering the information that's changed. It's not pushy sales tactics. It's more like useful, valuable content. So we're creating guides, how to not top 5 reasons. I'm trying to think of an example that I could give you for that. But we're creating content that's going to be super valuable for them. It's going to be guides. It's going to be resources, FAQs, family stories. Maybe it's videos. Maybe it's some of the care staff talking about why they love working at the community. Things like that are going to add value. It's going to build trust. So trust and value are probably two of the biggest things that we're trying to build up front. And so when you look at the storytelling piece, essentially that's what that's doing, is it's helping you really differentiate yourself through what's making your community unique. And when you're focused on storytelling, you're able to tell your prospects and families those things out of the gate. So, why you started the community, what life in the community looks like, what home inside your walls feels like. Those are all questions that you're going to be able to answer when you're storytelling versus when you're just doling out some information about your features and amenities.
Yeah, that's great. And it goes back to paint that picture of, can I see my relative here? And then I'm sure it makes it so much easier once they come in for a tour. They already have all this information. They've already thought about this place. They've already reviewed everything. They've already dreamt about like placing their family member in the home. And then they come and see it. And that's where everything is aligned, as you mentioned. And the tour just knocks their socks off and they're ready to put them in. So I think it's really important to have all that in alignment.
It's pretty hard to storytell and not be authentic. I don't know how you would storytell and just make things up, because obviously if you're trying to connect to somebody on an emotional level, they're going to connect with that story, and then they're going to want to experience that for themselves. So if there's not brand alignment in what they see online and what they see in person, that's never going to go anywhere. And obviously that wouldn't be good for the community. So I don't think anybody's storytelling in that sense.
Absolutely. Jerry, have you
Yeah.
seen that impact resident retention once they move into the home?
Yeah, as long as it's followed through. I think one of the things that I think about a lot is the marketing and sales team, and what does that look like after move-in? Are they still engaged in the process, or are they completely removed? And unfortunately, what you see a lot, and probably in the larger communities more so than the smaller communities, is that the marketing and sales team, they'll hand things off, right? They'll do their job, they'll get the lead in, the sales team will get them to sign on the dotted line, and then once they move in, they hand it off to operations, and then they disappear. So with storytelling, making sure that, I think, that story continues. There's a continuum there, right? After they move in, the marketing team, the sales team should still be a part of that story, because the marketing team is selling the vision. The sales team is helping to build trust and clarity around what the community has to offer and what the experience is going to be like once you move in. And then once they move in, that operations team has got to carry out everything that the marketing and sales team just promised. So when they're not all connected, that just creates a bad scenario, I think, for the resident. And I think that when we're all connected like that, and the storytelling continues beyond just the initial prospect phase, that's where families really fall in love with the community, because they feel like it's home. The residents really feel like they're part of a family, and that's where you're going to get the best referrals. I think communities that do really well with storytelling, they typically see a 30 to 40% of their move-ins, they come from referrals directly from the residents or their families. And that's the most cost-effective way to generate leads and generate move-ins. And it's also the most highest converting and with the shortest timeline. So the more you can storytell and the more you can get the whole team involved in that process, the better off you're going to be.
That is awesome. Yeah, I completely agree. That's really good stuff. Let's pivot a little bit, Jerry, and talk about some trends and what's coming next in the senior living space. What's something that you see on the horizon for the assisted living industry that maybe others aren't paying enough attention to?
There's a lot. Let me think here. There's a couple, I guess there's a couple shifts that we can talk about, but I think probably one of the biggest ones that people aren't necessarily paying attention to, but I think it's coming to the forefront really fast now that the baby boomer silver tsunami is happening right before our eyes. I think there's this shift in the decision-making journey from being reactive to more proactive. And I think that's because it's being driven by adult children rather than the residents themselves. And what I mean by that is if you look back and you think about marketing around senior living over the last few, probably the decades, right? It's been about crisis. It's all been focused on crisis. It's like what happens after a fall, or what happens after a hospital discharge, or what happens if there's a sudden change at home. And it's great to talk about those things, but I think those conversations now are happening at home. They're happening with the families because I think Gen X and millennial adult children are just far more engaged in understanding the importance of planning earlier. So they're doing deeper research online months and even sometimes years before they're even thinking about a move for mom or dad. So, you know, they're comparing communities like way before they're reaching out, and they're not judging based on pricing or amenities. They're looking at reputation. They're looking at how transparent that community is with their storytelling, and they're looking at all the other trust signals that they can find online. So again, that goes back to the demand generation piece. That's why it's important to have that education first content, because these Gen X adult children, they're doing the research. They're not necessarily reaching out, but they are doing the research and they want to learn as much as they can up front so that they're prepared when the time comes to make that change. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. That early education piece is going to be one of the biggest things that we're going to see shift for a lot of communities, no matter how big or small they are, because that early education, it's going to build credibility and it'll shorten the decision cycle later. So any community that's doing that now is going to shift their overall trajectory considerably if they focus on that. I think the other thing too would just be the blending of technology and personalization. We talk about AI a lot, AI assisted search, you say AI assisted chatbots and automation follow-ups, and it's all kind of becoming standard, but within the senior living space, there still has to be the human factor involved. So I think communities are going to have to figure out how to balance the human touch with the technology. But families too, they have expectations around technology. Like we're now understanding that technology can help with longevity, right? It can help residents live longer, healthier lives. It can help them have better relationships with their families who might not live as close. It can help them have better relationships with staff. It can help the community have better relations with the family. So there's all different ways that technology can help create a better atmosphere overall. And so the communities that are really investing into those digital assets and platforms and techniques and strategies, whatever it is that's out there, they're potentially putting themselves in a position to be in a different space than their competitors. So if they're doing something and a competitor's not doing it, a good example, like some of the bigger box communities, they've got robots in their cafeteria or something, or administering medications. And it sounds silly, but for some of the communities, the residents absolutely love it. And it's one of those things that, oh, this community has a robot and that one doesn't. So that all comes into play.
Yeah, that's crazy. I was thinking about that. I just saw recently on social media, I think it's called Neo, that humanoid robot. And I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
like probably by the time you and I are in one of these homes, we're going to have our own like Neo robot that takes care of us, which would be wild. But you're
Yeah.
right, man. The technology is always changing and it's growing so fast and changing so fast. I think it is really important to make sure you're at least taking a look at what some of these trends are and what new pieces of technology may benefit seniors more so going forward.
Yeah.
Thank you for those insights, Jerry. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and wrap things up here and hit some closing thoughts. So, what is, if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's about to open their first residential assisted living home and thinking about how to get their first few residents? Really giving you some easy questions tonight, Jerry.
I think because I think Rawls are in such a unique position because you don't really want to think about it like a community, and you don't want to think about it like a marketer. Almost think like a neighbor rather than a marketer, right? If you were opening up your first RAL, because your first residents, they're probably not going to come from ads, and they're probably not going to come from anything else other than the relationships that you've already established. The people who already know you and trust you, and maybe they're the ones who are referring your first residents to you. So I think building local credibility as much as you can and local visibility again is going to be really paramount. But starting with that Google business profile, obviously, that's the first no brainer option that you have. Investing in those photos, that's the second. But then also connecting with the outside community, making sure that you're visiting hospitals and you're talking with discharge planners and you're making connections in the local churches and senior centers, all the places that older adults might spend their time and their families might spend time. Showing up consistently, listening, being helpful, building trust, all of those things are going to make such a difference pretty quickly too in how fast you can fill your building. And also don't wait until the home is built. It doesn't have to be perfect to start marketing. You can do that 6 months beforehand to start generating some interest and buzz. I think people really get excited when they hear that something new is coming and they want to be a part of it. There's that FOMO aspect. Even in senior living, we just opened a new multi-level care community in Wisconsin, and we had the building 50% full before the building was even built.
Wow,
Because
that's
people were just
awesome.
excited. They were excited about it because it was new and trendy and super tech savvy, and so it was exciting. So yeah, so the communities that are going to fill the fastest, they don't always have the biggest budgets. They're just the ones that they're connecting with that community, they're telling the story, they're visible. Yeah, and they're just making those connections early on in the process.
That's great. Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. Jerry, what's something that you're working on right now that you're excited about?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I want to share, especially with your audience, is when I started in this industry, we've worked with a lot of big box operators, multi-location providers. And one of the biggest pain points for me as a business owner has been that I'm a small business owner and I understand the struggles and challenges of running a small business. And it's always been frustrating to me that while we have an amazing system that we've built and it gets great results, it costs a lot of money to initiate this and to run it every month. And so for the last couple of years, we've been really racking our brains. How can we produce something that will serve the small boutique operators, the 10 to 50 resident communities that they still need to and want to compete with the larger communities, but they don't have the budgets to do it. So we just actually rolled out a product. It's called Growthley, and it's built specifically for those communities. And we've been able to take our entire system, proprietary system that we use to align marketing, sales, and operations and get those great results. But we've rolled it into a package that eliminates the need for retainers. These smaller communities, they're not having to pay any retainers. It's a pay for performance model, essentially. So anyone who's familiar with a placement agency or a referral agency, they're familiar with the concept of paying a percentage of move-in as the cost of getting that lead through the door. With us, they would pay a percentage of move-in, but in exchange for that, rather than them just paying for the lead, they're getting an entire marketing team. They're getting marketing specialists, automation specialists, and even help managing their wait list once we get the community full. We manage all of that stuff for them. So they're getting all of that, and they're not having to pay any retainer to get it.
That's
So
awesome.
that's something that's really exciting for us because we've just always wanted to be able to help the smaller communities as much as possible. So that's really been tugging at my heartstrings, and we actually just launched it this week. So it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. Congratulations on Growthly. And
Yeah.
I'm sure folks will definitely be interested in learning more. How could folks reach out to you, Jerry, if they want to know more, they want to reach out, they want to connect with you?
Yeah. So if anyone wants to reach out and have a conversation with me, I always invite people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Jerry Vinci. I don't know if there's any other Jerry Vinci's on LinkedIn. So I'd absolutely love to have a conversation with you. For any of the larger operators out there that need help with their systems, please reach out to ccrgrowth.com. And then for any of the small boutique operators or even some of the RALs I think we can talk to, you can check us out at growthlyseniorliving.com.
That is awesome. Jerry, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. It's clear that the communities that you work with, they're leveling up in a big way and really seeing the benefit of marketing and getting ahead of things and working on the funnel and all those sorts of things that go along with it. So thank you so much for doing what you do. Thank you so much for helping communities take better care of seniors. And thanks again for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I love what you guys are doing. I love the message that you have, and this show has been great. It's been a great resource for me. So I just appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, Jerry. Thank you so much. And I appreciate everyone listening to this podcast. And until next week, we'll go ahead and sign off. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the RAL Room Assisted Living Podcast. We hope you found today's episode insightful. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave us a raving 5-star review. And a quick review helps more listeners find the show and more seniors get the exceptional care they deserve.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And just so you know, we have prepared some free resources for you to help you succeed in residential assisted living in addition to this podcast. Head over to theralroom.com, that is the RAL room.com, to download our free 10-step guide to launch your first or next residential assisted living home, or our 10 reasons to passively invest in residential assisted living ebooks.
And if you're ready to take the next step and make real moves in the RAL industry, join us in the RAL Room Mastermind. It is an exclusive community where we deep dive into everything you need to launch and grow your own residential assisted living business. You'll get access to recorded courses, live calls with industry experts, a RAL calculator, resources and tools, like-minded entrepreneurs, funding opportunities, and an expert networking community to help you along your journey. Be sure to join us next time on the RAL Room Podcast as we continue to explore the world of residential assisted living with more great guests. See you then.